egoistic altruism, which is like you want to be egoistic, you want to fulfill your own goals and dreams, you want to, I don't know, want to get that new car, want to buy a house, but also want to be altruistic in the sense of you want to help other people accomplishing their goals. So I think keeping the balance between egoism and altruism is like, I think, the perfect way to approach projects like YouTube, blogs, and courses. My name is Jousef Murad. Some people might know me as Jousef from also the YouTube channel and the podcast called Engineered Mind. I'm a mechanical engineer based in Germany, and I'm currently an engineer, product marketing engineer working for the company SimScale. And on the side, I'm also hosting a podcast, as I mentioned, working for another company called Monolith, which is like a no-code AI platform to empower engineers all over the world. During my studies, I always was very inquisitive and like curious. So in my bachelor's, I kind of focused a bit more on the finite element analysis part. So how can we subdivide, for example, a continuous domain like this thing here? So how could we simulate this? For example, if we apply a force to this cute little squishy thing here, how can we predict how the stresses will look like and how the object will deform? So this is the main objective of the finite element method, basically taking equations which define life or basically describe nature and then analyzing these parts. Then in my master's, I kind of switched to or transitioned to fluid dynamics, which kind of a bit involves thermodynamics if you like solve a fluid flow with like temperature differences and things like that. So you have something called the energy equation, which is solved, especially when you have like compressible flows, but it's a bit too technical now. But the transition to AI, I think, happened in my master thesis where I kind of wanted to do something with AI, basically jump on the AI hype train, basically programmed something in Blender. And you would have something, let's take the squishy object for a moment, and you have a camera goes around the object, takes pictures of that, which uses it then as an input for a convolutional neural network. And the algorithm then tried to predict what this object is. And I did this for mechanical parts, for example, turbochargers and other mechanical parts like crankshafts and so on. Worked kind of okay-ish, could have been better for sure. But I think that was the first step into AI. Of course, taking some courses, looking at some videos, and of course, having great guests on my podcast talking about AI. I think I'm very overwhelmed by it, especially with the plethora of papers coming out. But what I try to do is, for example, Twitter is a very good place to inform yourself about AI, latest developments of AI. So I'm trying to follow accounts that don't spam too much, but give you very good information of what's the latest tech news in terms of AI. Being on LinkedIn helps, connecting with like-minded people, AI thought leaders. I think that helps a lot. Usually I wake up relatively early, depends on the day and the mood, I guess. But usually then I have a coffee, start my work for SimScale, and then my freelance work I usually do after work or a bit during the day, which is like for Monolith. And then on late afternoon, I record podcasts, work on new video projects, have some other projects on the side, like building my new website, things like that. So a lot to do. This brings us to the term education. Once you try to educate people and try to find different ways how to educate people the best way possible, whether it's via YouTube channel, like some people like learning more by listening. Some people like to see a lot of stuff, have like visualizations. So that's what I'm working on currently. How can I make education for engineers and the field of AI better? So I would like to educate people all around the world and have kind of a goal of reaching 1 million subs at some point in the future. But this is not the main objective. The main objective is basically to improve my video quality, video production quality, whether it's like audio, buying like a mic, things like that, I think, which impacts your learning process. But also how can we teach people better? And that's what I'm basically working on, trying to find the best way possible. And I'm having a side project, which is running in the background, which would probably involve a new channel, which I'm launching. And this would be like documentary kind of style videos where, for example, when I talk about AI, how did AI start in the first place? I mean, it's kind of an ambitious goal, but I would like to be one of the best channels for AI/engineering in the future. And kind of slowly building my way up to that. For example, when it comes to how do I animate stuff, how do I explain stuff in such a simple way that even a 5-year-old would understand it. I might even outsource some tasks in the future, for example, because it's simply too much work, like editing podcasts, editing smaller clips, things like that. Yeah, there's so many people, but I think the most famous one is Grant Sanderson with 3 blue, 1 brown. Like he does a very good job. And I kind of have to admit, like once I'm trying to do kind of visualizations, I thought about using his Manim library on GitHub, which is really, really cool. There are like smaller channels who use his Manim library and do very great stuff with it as well. So I like, for example, the TensorFlow Google channel is very good when it comes to AI education. That's very nice. Definitely agree, because one of my main motivations was to start an own channel, because I was so frustrated from the professor explaining it to me, because I thought, well, this is like an expert in this field and he's explaining it such a difficult way that almost nobody got it. Well, maybe the smart ones, but I wasn't the smartest one in class, so I had to do something about it. So explain it in such simple terms that everyone would understand it. And I think the videos that I have, for example, on the Navier-Stokes equation and so on, I think the feedback speaks for itself, because it's in such simple terms that everyone can understand it and not start from a very complicated equation. A lot of research goes into this. This is why I'm kind of a bit hesitant now to create more videos like these, because there's so much research going into these videos. Like, if I explain it that way, well, then someone else might think I meant it that way, but I meant it in a certain, like a different way. So you have to basically find the perfect balance between everyone, basically the average population. Would the average viewer on YouTube like this video? And what questions would this viewer have, having no knowledge in the field of AI/engineering? And can I cover this with my video? That's always the question I'm asking myself. I'll try to be in the position of a beginner. And what would a beginner ask themselves? Like, what is this error? What is this vector thing, vector field? And then I'm trying to cover this in the video, but of course, keeping the balance of not making the video too long. This is the tricky part. I think there is no like ISO standard like for education. I think we as creators have to make sure that we are doing the best that we possibly can, like whether it's like audio quality, educational quality, like even video quality, and explain in such a good way that we can basically sleep good at night. Well, you could take Grant, like 3 Blue, 1 Brown, as an example, but will you ever be as good as him? Maybe you can even become better than him. But I think having him as a threshold is not the way I would like to see it. Like, maybe even try to become better as Grant. Maybe it's a very ambitious goal, but if you try to become better than him and take him as kind of a baseline level, I think we are on a good way to have very, very good education for everyone. Well, there were so many. I think especially because I work for startups, there are everyday challenges I have to overcome with. It's like special projects I have to work on with colleagues, learning new skills. I think this is the beauty of working in a startup. You're not having your fixed niche where you work in, but you have a lot of responsibilities, which could also be sometimes very daunting and frustrating. But I think every day is a challenge in itself. And I think if we are alive, we survived 100% of our bad days. And whether it's private challenges or like work challenges, I think there's not big of a difference. So finding a way to overcome these downs, like these valleys, is something everyone has to figure out by themselves, or like taking help from others. I mentioned on another podcast, it was kind of a personal failure, because when I was younger, I had a lot of issues with teachers, kind of a bit of a rebel, I would say. So that was a bit of a downside. I guess it has advantages as well as big disadvantages. I had to change schools because of certain issues. If I could motivate someone, like, you don't have to be an A student, you could be a C student and still do super great stuff and change the world. So you don't have to be at the top. It really depends on the individual situation of everyone. For example, if your parents want you to do this particular job because, well, you have done a higher status in family, this is something different. Then it's kind of hard for me to give advice. But if someone is completely free in their decisions, well, freedom is kind of an illusion, but that's another topic. I would say if you daydream about something very often and you can pursue that path and it's paying kind of okay-ish, you can feed yourself, I think I would go down that path. For example, if I couldn't do YouTube full-time now, definitely not. It's not paying well enough, but it's something I'm working on the side. Do something while you're studying, build an audience while you're studying. For example, write blog posts, build your own website, and just share everything you can of what you've learned during the week in a blog post. Because I think especially people from HR, they will also look for projects that you have done on the side, not only look at your grades. Because I think you can be an A student, but horrible in like teamwork, on like social skills and being empathetic. Well, in my bachelor's, I was kind of a C, B, C student. And then in my master's, I was an A student, but then dropped because I wanted not to be an A student anymore, but rather be a C student, but then could work on other projects on the side. So everyone has to decide for themselves, would they want to be an A student and like kind of show it to other people that had an A in this class? But it's kind of irrelevant, because in 5 years after you graduated, nobody would really care what you had in university in this particular class. They only want to see what you have worked on in industry or on the side. That's my personal opinion. This is so difficult, because I think if you're like a perfectionist, I can speak from first-hand experience, it's very hard to be happy at the same time. It's kind of sometimes frustrating, but I think if you make your happiness depending on a goal, so there's something called in psychology called the hedonic treadmill. So whenever you will always reach a certain level of stability. For example, if you have a success or a downside, you will always reach like kind of a stable emotional state at a certain level. For example, your neighbor drives a Tesla, and then you will also get a Tesla, but after some time it will become too boring. Then would like to have even more. So I think if you make happiness dependent or link it to like materialistic things like money, grades, you will definitely become unhappy. So make your happiness dependent not on materialistic things, but being healthy. Maybe have some kind of a daily journal where you write down your 3 favorite things that you cherish or like really value. For example, you have a healthy family, things like that, like personal stuff. Because I think at the end of the life, for example, when you lay in bed and you see all your relatives standing around you, I think nobody would really say that you were the hardest worker in the room, but they always would think back how you made them feel and not how much you worked. This is my personal opinion. But of course, hard work is also necessary to make a change. It's different in every culture. For example, Chinese culture is different than European culture, for example, what they set as a standard. Right now, when it comes to political issues, if you are like a bit away from the mainstream, you're kind of being criticized or being an outsider. But I think what you should never forget is maybe think for yourself. Of course, you shouldn't be like super crazy, kind of judging, is this right, what this person is saying? Maybe I'm going to check it myself or maybe hear other opinions. And I think being flexible, always having an open ear to other opinions, whether it's like like whether it's on your side or against your side, builds your mind and builds your relationships, builds your empathy as well. We hear so many things, or like being very picky of what we want to hear, that it's really, really hard to kind of build your own brain, basically your second brain. It's so hard. Actually, I don't have a solution to this. You could say, okay, yeah, F it, I'm going to do my own stuff. But then I think sometimes it helps to have kind of a feedback loop from society, whether that's the company or really like societal mainstream, to maybe ground yourself. And another point, of course, if you want to say society, something like family, then it's becoming even more difficult because your family expects something from you, whether you study mechanical engineering, chemistry, mathematics. And if you don't follow that path, you're kind of the outsider. To those people, I would probably say, try to go your own path and try to prove people wrong. Of course, we always have doubt. For example, when I look at my subscribers in the beginning, I was like refreshing my YouTube Studio app every second. Like, okay, one more sub. So you kind of build your confidence on top of this kind of metric, which is kind of imaginary. But even though I only have 13,000 people following me, and then also on LinkedIn, if you follow us, getting emails from one person or two person who write me like, you impacted my life, you impacted my career choice. I think this is then way more relevant than like a number, which is kind of an imaginary metric that you set yourself. The main goal should always be, and I know my podcast listeners hate me for this because I always say like egoistic altruism, which is like you want to be egoistic, you want to fulfill your own goals and dreams, you want to, I don't know, want to get that new car, want to buy a house, but also want to be altruistic in the sense of you want to help other people accomplishing their goals. So I think keeping the balance between egoism and altruism is like, I think, the perfect way to approach projects like YouTube, blogs, and courses. If I now say Joe Rogan, I think you might get or being attacked for that. But I think Joe Rogan has a very good podcast, especially the ones with Elon Musk, Naval Ravikant, Mike Tyson, for example. It doesn't have to be only like scientists you listen to, but from sports who inspire you. But Naval Ravikant is definitely someone you should check out. He has so many good quotes. There's also a book from Eric Jorgensen, who was also on my podcast, called The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. Very good book. Recommend it to everyone. Giving a bit of context from Eric in the book, it's basically kind of a condensed version of the best tweets of Naval. And if you don't follow Naval on Twitter, then you definitely have to. Yeah, this is kind of a like two-sided answer probably, because on one side I'm very, very excited to see what AI brings. How can we impact society, make society or Earth a better place? And on the other side, we also have to think about like military applications, right? Where will AI be used? And of course, collateral damages. Maybe in my own dream world of thinking, there will be like artificial general intelligence, and one day there will be a robot which I can ask all the questions, which kind of like the Oracle from the Matrix, right? You ask it a question, and then yeah, I already know this. And I would be really interested to see how can we make machines feel? How do we embed emotions into machines is, I think, something that's really exciting me. I want to see that. Whether it's from Boston Dynamics or any other company, I don't know. AI could also create many new jobs. For example, when we think about streamers, nobody 50 years ago would think, hey, what is this kind of thing called streamers? Nobody would believe that or like think about that. So I think it will open new doors and close a few others. I'm trying to be optimistic about the future, although we know a lot about the downsides of AI as well. Also, like when it comes to biases in AI algorithms. A documentary I can recommend is Coded Bias on Netflix. Very good. Everyone should watch it. How actually algorithms are biased. On LinkedIn, just Jousef Murad is my name there. YouTube channel, of course, Jousef Murad as well, and Twitter, and if you want, Instagram.